Mr. President, and I use that term very loosely. I'm not sure what little power play you imagine you're making by calling me here, but let me be absolutely clear. I am not one of your scared little Republican congressmen who just kiss your ring. I represent actual people, real Americans, not your billionaire friends and Mar-a-Lago cronies. Ilhan Omar stood there, right in front of the resolute desk, arms crossed, her voice dripping with contempt. She had refused the chair that was offered, wanting to stand, wanting to look down at him, wanting to show she wasn't intimidated. And frankly, she continued, her voice rising, an elderly man with 91 felony indictments, who can barely string a coherent sentence together, and who incited an insurrection against his own government, probably shouldn't be lecturing anyone about anything. So, if this meeting is about my statements on Palestine, about calling out Israel's apartheid regime, you can take your fake outrage and just consider yourself done. President Trump interrupted calmly from behind his desk. He didn't look angry, didn't even seem annoyed. He just sat there with a slight smile, as if he were watching something mildly entertaining. It was January 28, 2025, just over a week into Trump's second term. The Oval Office on a cold winter afternoon saw light streaming through its tall windows. This wasn't a normal congressional meeting at all. There were no staff taking notes, no photographers, just Trump behind the resolute desk, FBI Director Christopher Wray standing off to the side with thick folders, DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen with her own files, and two Secret Service agents by the doors. Omar had been summoned by White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles earlier that morning. The President requests your presence at 3:00 p.m. Urgent national security matter. No details, no explanation, just the summons itself. She thought she knew exactly what this was all about. She thought Trump was trying to intimidate her over her pro-Palestinian statements, over her criticism of Israel, over her tweets calling out U.S. foreign policy, so she had come ready to fight. Alert the media. Have cameras waiting outside. Stand up to the bully president. Show her supporters she was fearless. Now she stood in the Oval Office, believing she had the upper hand, thinking her media profile protected her, thinking Trump was just another old man she could dominate with righteous anger, just as she'd dominated every other confrontation in her political career. She had no idea what was about to happen. "No, I'm not done," she snapped, cutting off his interruption. "You want to talk about national security? You're the national security threat. You're a racist who banned Muslims from entering this country. You're a fascist who puts children in cages. You're everything wrong with America, all wrapped up in a cheap suit and a bad spray tan." She leaned forward, aggressive and confrontational, onto his desk. "You think you can silence me? I have millions of followers. I have CNN and MSNBC and every major progressive organization defending me. You're a weak old man playing tough guy because that's all you know how to do. Your own party barely tolerates you. Half your cabinet thinks you're losing your mind, and you want to threaten me?" Trump still didn't react the way she expected. He didn't get angry. He didn't yell back. He just sat there, watching her with that same slight smile. "I'm not scared of you," Omar continued, her voice shaking with anger. "I've faced worse than you. I fled a civil war. I came to this country with nothing. I've been targeted by racists my whole life. You're just another bully who thinks his power makes him strong. But you're nothing. You're a pathetic old man who—" "Sit down." Trump's voice suddenly cut through her rant. It wasn't loud, not angry, just cold, absolute. The voice of someone who'd run billion-dollar companies and wasn't asking. Omar paused mid-sentence, Something in his tone made her hesitate. "I said, sit down," Trump repeated, his voice still calm, but carrying an edge of steel underneath. "Because what I'm about to show you is going to change your entire life, and you're going to want to be sitting when you hear it." For the very first time, Omar felt a flicker of uncertainty. This wasn't playing out at all like she'd expected. Trump should have been yelling back at her by now, should have been getting defensive, but he looked completely relaxed, almost amused. Slowly, she lowered herself into the chair facing his desk. Her confidence began to waver, just slightly. Trump leaned forward, his expression changing. The slight smile vanished. What replaced it was something colder, more serious. "You think you're here because of your Palestine statements?" he said quietly. "You think I give a damn about your tweets? I don't care what you say about Israel. I don't care about your rallies. I don't care about your interviews with CNN. You're here because for the past 6 months, the FBI has been investigating you for terrorism, financing, and immigration fraud." He pushed a thick folder across the desk toward her. "And this morning, I declassified all of it." Omar felt her blood run cold. She looked at the folder as if it were a snake. Trump continued, his voice steady. "Matter of fact, your brother-in-law in Mogadishu, Ahmed Noor, says he's an al-Shabaab financier. Treasury designated his money transfer business as a terrorism financing entity. And the money you've been wiring to him, $78,000 over 3 years, goes directly to terrorists." Omar's mouth went dry. "I don't know what your citizenship," Trump kept going, ignoring her attempted interruption. "Obtained through fraud. You claimed your mother died in Somalia. She's alive, living in London. We have passport records of you visiting her. You claimed you came as a refugee fleeing violence. You used a fake family name to qualify for refugee status. You committed immigration fraud to get here." He leaned back in his chair. "So, here's what's going to happen. You have 72 hours to resign from Congress and leave the United States voluntarily. You renounce your fraudulent citizenship. You get on a plane. You go back to Somalia or wherever else will take you. Do that, and all of this stays quiet. You can spin your resignation however you want. Health reasons, family reasons, whatever story you want to tell." He paused. "Let that sink in, or you refuse, and tomorrow morning I hold a press conference in the Rose Garden. I declassify every single page of this investigation. The terrorism financing, the immigration fraud, the FB watch list you've been on since 2018. I sign an executive order initiating denaturalization proceedings on national security grounds. DHS arrests you. You get detained while you fight it in court for the next 2 years. You lose because the evidence is overwhelming. Your citizenship gets stripped and then deports you to Somalia publicly, with every camera in the world watching." Trump's voice got quieter. "Easy way or hard way, your choice. You've got 72 hours. Omar sat frozen. This couldn't be real. This had to be a bluff. Some kind of intimidation tactic. "You can't do this. This is unconstitutional. You can't just strip a member of Congress." "Director Wray," Trump said, not taking his eyes off Omar. "Show her what we have so she understands this isn't a bluff." FBI Director Christopher Wray stepped forward, opening one of his folders. His expression was completely neutral, professional. This was just evidence to him. And as Wray began laying out 6 months of investigation, Omar realized with growing horror that this wasn't a bluff at all. This was real, and her entire life was about to be destroyed. To understand how we got here, how the woman who'd been summoned expecting to bully the president ended up facing deportation, you have to go back 4 hours earlier, when Omar was still confident this was just another performance opportunity. 4 hours earlier, Ilhan Omar sat in her congressional office, reviewing talking points with her communications team. The White House call had come at 10 that morning. Chief of Staff Susie Wilds, formal and brief. The President requests Representative Omar's presence at the Oval Office at 3:00 p.m. Day. Urgent national security matter. Please confirm attendance. No details beyond that. No indication of subject matter. Just the summons. Omar's communications director, a young progressive activist named Maya Hernandez, looked concerned. National security matter is vague. Could be anything. Should we try to get more information before you go? Omar waved dismissively. It's obvious what this is about. I've been all over cable news calling out Israel's genocide in Gaza, calling for cutting military aid. Trump's donors are furious. This is him trying to intimidate me, trying to make me back down. Her chief of staff wasn't so sure. The phrasing is unusual, though. Usually, when they want to complain about policy statements, they just have a staffer call. The president personally requesting your presence is different. Because he thinks he can bully me in person, Omar said with confidence. He thinks if he gets me in the Oval Office, I'll be scared that I'll moderate my positions. He has no idea who he's dealing with. She felt supremely confident. She'd become one of the most recognizable members of Congress, part of the squad with AOC, Rashida Tlaib, and Ayanna Pressley, with nearly 4 million Twitter followers and constant appearances on MSNBC and CNN. She had built her entire career on being that fearless progressive, the one who challenged authority and never backed down from anyone. Throughout his first term, Trump had relentlessly attacked her, tweeting that she should return to Somalia and branding her an anti-Semite. For years, conservative media had fixated on her, and each attack only served to boost her fame, increase her power, and deepen her base's adoration. Trump's attacks had become her fundraising goldmine, bringing in millions. This time, she figured, would be no different. Trump was attempting to intimidate her. She'd stand firm, then walk out to launch a media blitz, detailing how she had put him in his place. Her supporters would absolutely devour it. More donations would pour in. More fame was guaranteed. This wasn't a threat. It was an opportunity. Omar turned to Maya, giving clear instructions. Alert our media contacts. I want friendly reporters waiting right outside the White House, Chai, she emphasized. After the meeting, I'll issue a statement about whatever authoritarian nonsense he attempted to pull, she declared. CNN will probably want me on live, she added confidently. Maya nodded, already busy texting her contacts. But what if he actually has something serious? What if this is about something completely off our radar? Omar simply laughed. Like what? She scoffed. I'm a sitting member of Congress, she reminded them. I have constitutional protections, she asserted. What exactly is he going to do? The absolute worst he can do is yell at me, and I'm quite good at handling angry old men who shout. She then spent the next hour meticulously preparing. Her preparation wasn't about defense, it was about offense. She wasn't walking into the Oval Office to receive a lecture. Instead, she intended to make a powerful statement, demonstrating to both Trump and the entire world that she would not be intimidated. She mentally rehearsed her lines, envisioning how she'd stand rather than sit, how she'd cut him off if he launched into his typical rambling, and how she'd directly confront him about his racism and incompetence. It was going to be legendary. Her staff would ensure every detail was leaked. Progressives across the country would hail her courage. What Omar couldn't possibly know or even fathom was that, while she meticulously prepared her grand performance, Trump had spent his entire morning in the Situation Room, poring over 6 months of an intense FBI investigation. This was evidence she had no idea existed, a case she would never have anticipated, and he had deliberately chosen this specific day because he possessed all the necessary information to terminate her career and deport her from the country she had allegedly entered fraudulently. That very morning, at 8 o'clock, well before Omar's scheduled summons, President Trump was seated in the White House Situation Room alongside a small, select group: FBI Director Christopher Wray, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, NSA Director General Sarah Mitchell, White House Counsel Todd Blanche, and Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. The table in the secure conference room was laden with classified folders, detailed financial records, and critical immigration files. 6 months of meticulous investigation had been distilled into a mountain of evidence, capable of utterly destroying a sitting member of Congress. Trump himself looked remarkably fresh and energized. He had been patiently waiting for this exact moment. "All right," he began, "walk me through absolutely everything. I need to know every single detail before she arrives this afternoon," he commanded. FBI Director Wray, with the deliberate precision of a man who had spent 3 decades building cases, slowly opened his first folder. "We initiated this investigation 6 months ago," Wray began, "when Treasury alerted us to unusual wire transfers originating from Representative Omar and heading to Somalia. The amounts were carefully structured: 3,000 here, 5,000 there, always deliberately falling just under the $10,000 reporting threshold," he explained. "That's a glaring red flag for potential money laundering or terrorism financing," he stated gravely. He then pulled out a stack of financial records. "We meticulously traced these transfers," Wray continued. "The recipient is Ahmed Noura, based in Mogadishu. He is Omar's brother-in-law, specifically her first husband's brother," he clarified. "Ahmed operates an informal Hawala money transfer network known as Tawakkal Express." "Hawala?" Trump interjected, questioning the term. "It's an informal money transfer system, very common across Somalia, the Middle East, and Africa," Wray quickly explained. "It relies on trust and family networks, making it incredibly difficult to trace through traditional banking systems. However, we secured court orders and collaborated with reliable Somali sources," Wray detailed. "In 2023, the Treasury Department officially designated Tawakkal Express as a terrorism financing entity," he revealed. "Ahmed Noura himself is prominently featured on the FBI's terrorism watch list," Wray added, delivering another blow. He then produced a series of surveillance photos from Mogadishu. One showed a man in traditional Somali dress standing outside a storefront with noticeably peeling paint. "This, right here, is Ahmed," he confirmed, pointing to the image. "And we possess extensive evidence, including intercepts, informant reports, and financial tracking, that he funnels money from Tawakkal directly to al-Shabaab operatives across southern Somalia," Wray concluded. Trump intently studied the photos, then turned to Wray. "And Omar is sending him money?" $78,000 over the past 3 years, Wray confirmed without hesitation. 17 separate wire transfers, all meticulously structured to evade any reporting requirements, he elaborated. "We've definitively traced at least 34,000 of that money directly to individuals on various terrorism watch lists," Wray asserted. "These are bank accounts belonging to known al-Shabaab commanders and their facilitators," he specified. He then spread out a complex flowchart, clearly illustrating the intricate money movement. Omar wires money to Ahmed, he began. Ahmed then moves it through Tawakkal. From there, it disperses to multiple individuals. And some of those individuals are officially designated terrorists, Ray concluded grimly. It's not a direct connection, we admit. She could certainly claim ignorance about Ahmed's activities with the money, but the overall pattern is absolutely undeniable. And she's smart enough to know exactly what her brother-in-law does. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem presented the next section, her voice tight with controlled anger. The terrorism financing is serious, but the immigration fraud is what gives us the legal basis for denaturalization. Her entire presence in the United States is based on lies. She opened immigration files dating back decades. Representative Omar's official biography says she came to the United States in 1992 as a refugee fleeing the Somali Civil War. Says her mother died in Somalia when she was young. Says her father brought her and her siblings to escape violence. All of that is used to maintain her image as a refugee success story. It's also almost entirely false. Noem pulled out documentation. Her mother didn't die in Somalia. Her name is Fadumo Aden. She's alive and has been living in London since 1991. We have British passport records. We have entry and exit stamps showing Omar has visited her mother in London at least 8 times since 2015. But publicly, Omar claims her mother died when she was a child. Trump leaned forward. So, she's been lying about her dead mother being alive. It gets worse, Noem continued. The refugee application that brought her family to the United States in 1992 was filed under the name Omar Family. But birth records we've obtained from Somalia suggest she was actually born Ilhan Nur Sai last name as Ahmed, the Al-Shabaab financier. We believe she used a different family name Omar instead of Nur Sai to qualify for refugee status under family reunification provisions. She showed the documents. If she was actually Ilhan Nur Sai, she wouldn't have qualified under the Omar family application, so she assumed a different identity. That's immigration fraud. Fraud that allowed her to enter the country and eventually become a citizen. Can we prove that? White House counsel Todd Blanche asked. Birth records from Somalia during a civil war aren't exactly reliable. We have multiple sources, Noem said. Birth certificate filed in 1982, listing her as Ilhan Nur. School records from Kenya refugee camp using that name. Testimony from individuals who knew the family. And here's the smoking gun. Her marriage records. She pulled out more documents. Omar married Ahmed Hersi in Islamic ceremony in 2002. They had 2 children. Then in 2009, she married Ahmed Nur Sahed Elmi in a legal civil ceremony. DNA testing from Somali sources suggests Elmi is her biological brother. She married her brother likely to help him obtain immigration status. Then she divorced Elmi in 2017 and legally married Hersi in 2018. Trump looked disgusted. She married her brother. We can't prove that definitively without DNA testing here, which she'd refuse. Noem admitted. But the evidence is strong. Same family name, same tribal affiliation, sources saying they're siblings. The timing of the marriage aligned perfectly with him needing immigration status. Then she divorced him once he had his papers. It's a classic immigration fraud scheme. NSA Director Mitchell added another layer. We've also been monitoring her communications under FISA warrant. She's in regular contact with Somali government officials, Muslim Brotherhood-linked individuals. Some of these contacts are concerning from a counterintelligence perspective. She showed intercepts. We have calls where she discusses U.S. policy towards Somalia with Somali government ministers. where she appears to be coordinating positions, where she refers to Somalia as we and America as they. Nothing explicitly illegal, but the pattern suggests her primary loyalty is to Somalia and Islamic political movements, not to the United States. Trump absorbed it all. 6 months of investigation, terrorism financing, immigration fraud, fraudulent marriages, foreign communications suggesting split loyalty. It was overwhelming. White House counsel Blanche outlined the legal strategy. We have 3 potential paths. 1. Criminal prosecution for terrorism financing and immigration fraud. But that takes years, requires convincing a D.C. jury, and she'd be free while fighting it. 2. To push for congressional expulsion requires a 2/3 vote in the House. Unlikely to get that many Democrats to vote for it, even with this evidence. 3. Denaturalization. Explain that. Trump said, if citizenship was obtained through fraud or material misrepresentation, it can be revoked. Blanche explained. This falls under Immigration and Nationality Act, Section 340. We file a civil denaturalization complaint in federal court. We then present evidence that she lied on her applications about her name, her family, her background. If the judge agrees the fraud was material to obtaining citizenship, it can be stripped. How long does that take? Could take 2 years if she fights every step, Blanche admitted. But here's the play. We offer her a choice. Resign from Congress and leave the country voluntarily within 72 hours. She can tell any story she wants, health reasons, family reasons, or going back to help Somalia. We won't press charges, nor will we pursue denaturalization. It all stays quiet. However, if she refuses, then we'll go nuclear. We'll hold a press conference announcing the investigation. We'll declassify enough information to show the public that she's a terrorism financier and an immigration fraud. We'll file denaturalization proceedings. She'll fight it, but she'll ultimately lose. The evidence is simply too strong. And while she's fighting, she'll be toxic. No Democrat will defend her. She'll lose in court. Her citizenship will be stripped. She'll become a deportable alien. ICE will take custody and deport her to Somalia. Trump smiled slowly. I like it. She gets to choose, but either way, he said, she's gone. W.S. added his political calculation. If she leaves quietly, we avoid a media circus. No accusations of targeting Muslims or immigrants. She'll just fade away. If she fights, it becomes a huge story. But we have the evidence to back it up. Either way, it works. Trump made his decision. Set up the meeting for 3:00 p.m. Don't tell her what it's about. Let her walk in thinking she's going to lecture me about Palestine or whatever. Let her get comfortable. Then I'm going to give her the choice. And I want to see her face when she realizes she's finished. At 2:30, Omar's motorcade arrived at the White House. She'd already alerted friendly media that she was meeting with the president. CNN had a reporter stationed outside, and MSNBC was on alert for a possible live interview afterward. Omar walked through security with her head held high, ready for confrontation, ready to stand up to the bully. She'd spent the car ride rehearsing her lines, plotting how she'd call out his racism, his incompetence, and his authoritarian impulses. She was escorted through the West Wing, down the hallway to the Oval Office. The door opened, and that's when everything went wrong. The room wasn't set up for a normal meeting. There was no staff taking notes, no photographers, just Trump behind his desk looking relaxed. FBI Director Wray stood with folders, and DHS Secretary Mayorkas was there with files. Secret Service was posted at the doors. Something felt off, but Omar was committed to her plan. She refused the offered chair, stood in front of the desk, and launched into her prepared attack. Mr. President, and I use that term very loosely, I don't know what little power play you think you're pulling. She unleashed every insult she'd prepared, every attack she'd rehearsed. She called him elderly, senile, racist, fascist. She brought up his indictments, his mental decline, and his authoritarian impulses. Everything she'd been saying on Twitter, but now she was saying it to his face. Trump just sat there, letting her vent. He didn't interrupt, a slight smile on his face, like he was enjoying the show. When she finished, breathing hard, feeling powerful, he asked simply, "Are you done?" She started again, offering more insults. "Sit down." His voice cut through, cold and absolute. And for the first time, Omar felt real fear because Trump wasn't reacting the way she'd expected. And that meant this wasn't what she'd expected. "I said sit down," Trump repeated, "because what I'm about to show you is going to change your entire life." Slowly, she sat, all the confidence draining away. "You think you're here about Palestine?" Trump said quietly. "I don't care about your tweets. You're here because you're a national security threat, and I'm giving you one chance to leave quietly before I destroy you publicly." He pushed the folder across the desk. "Director Wray, show her what we have." And Omar's world began to collapse. FBI Director Wray stepped forward, opening his folder with practiced efficiency. He'd presented evidence in hundreds of briefings over his career. Terrorists, spies, criminals. This was just another case. The fact that the subject was sitting across from him in the Oval Office didn't change the evidence. "Congresswoman Omar," he began, his voice neutral and professional. "For the past 6 months, the FBI has been conducting a counterterrorism investigation involving financial transactions between you and individuals designated as terrorism supporters. Let me walk you through what we found." He pulled out financial records, laying them on the desk where she could see them. Bank statements with highlighted transactions, wire transfer confirmations, each one carefully documented. Starting in January 2022, you began making regular wire transfers to an individual in Mogadishu, Somalia, Ahmed Noor Say, your brother-in-law. The transfers were always structured to be under $10,000 to avoid currency transaction reporting requirements. $3,000 here, $5,000 there, $4,000. Over 3 years, there were 17 separate transfers totaling $78,000. Omar tried to speak, but Wray continued smoothly. "Now, sending money to family overseas isn't illegal. Many immigrants do it. But we investigated where the money was going. Ahmed Noor, they say, runs a business known as Tawakkal Express. It's essentially a Hawala money transfer network." He then showed her surveillance photos of a storefront in Mogadishu. There were people clearly lined up outside. Tawakkal, for its part, presents itself as a perfectly legitimate money transfer service for the Somali diaspora. However, in November 2023, the U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control officially designated Tawakkal Express as a terrorism financing entity, all because we had gathered concrete evidence that it was actively being used to funnel money directly to Al-Shabaab. Omar's face, by this point, had gone completely pale. "I didn't know Ahmed Noor was on the FBI's terrorism watch list," Wray said flatly, while showing her the classified designation. "We have intercepts of his direct communications with known Al-Shabaab commanders," he continued. "We also have informant testimony detailing his specific role within the organization's financial network. And we have clear surveillance footage showing him meeting with designated terrorists." He then laid out the intricate money trail. "We meticulously traced your transfers through Tawakkal's accounts," he explained. The $78,000 you sent, it didn't just stay with Ahmed. It moved. We tracked at least $34,000 of it going directly to bank accounts belonging to individuals on terrorism watch lists, known al-Shabaab facilitators, weapons purchasers, and people actively engaged in terrorism against the Somali government and African Union forces. With that, he pulled out a stack of photos of some of these individuals. They showed men in tactical gear, men wielding weapons. These are just some of the people who received money that originated from your wire transfers, he stated. This man, Abdullahi Hassan, for example, is a known al-Shabaab commander in the lower Shabelle region. He received $8,000 that we traced all the way back through the network to your transfer from March 2023. And this man, Muhammad Abdi, is an explosives expert. He received $6,000 that came directly from your August 2023 transfer. Omar now looked genuinely ill. I was just sending money to family, she protested. I had no idea what Ahmed was doing with it. You're a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Ray said, his tone flat and unwavering. You receive regular classified briefings on al-Shabaab and terrorism financing networks across East Africa. You've been briefed specifically on Hawala networks being utilized for terrorism financing. You knew, or at the very least, should have known exactly what you were doing. He then revealed even more evidence. We also have phone records, he added. You spoke with Ahmed 17 times over that same 3-year period, always just before or immediately after a wire transfer. And on 4 of those calls, you discussed the political situation in Somalia, along with security conditions, which is information that could be extremely useful to al-Shabaab in planning operations. I was just asking about family, Omar protested weakly, her voice barely a whisper. On a call from March 2023, you specifically told Ahmed that U.S. military support for African Union forces was being reduced. That information was highly classified at the time. You learned it in a Foreign Affairs Committee briefing just 2 days earlier. You passed that information to someone on a terrorism watch list. Ray then deliberately closed that section of his folder. The legal standard for material support to terrorism is clear. It's providing any support, including financial, to designated terrorists, regardless of whether you specifically intend for that support to aid terrorism. You sent $78,000 that ultimately ended up in terrorists' hands. That, Congresswoman, is a federal crime carrying a sentence of up to 20 years in prison. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem stepped forward next. She was a former governor, not a career law enforcement official. But after spending months reviewing immigration files, her anger at what she'd uncovered was barely contained. Congresswoman, she began, her voice tight with controlled fury. Your entire presence here in the United States is based entirely on fraud. Your refugee application, your asylum claims, your citizenship application, every single one of them was built on lies. With a sharp motion, she opened the immigration files. Inside were documents yellowed with age. These were applications dating back to the 1990s. Your official biography states that you came to the United States in 1992 as a refugee, fleeing the Somali Civil War. You were supposedly 8 years old at the time. You claim your mother died in Somalia when you were just a child. You also claim your father brought you and your siblings to America to escape the violence. You've told this compelling story hundreds of times. It's become your personal origin story. The refugee who rose to become a congresswoman. Noem then pulled out another document. This, she declared, is a British passport record for Fadumo Aden, issued in 1991. Your mother, Noem paused for effect, who according to you supposedly died in Somalia in the 1980s. Omar's eyes went wide, disbelief etched on her face. That's not... Your mother is alive, Congresswoman. She's been living in London since 1991. We have 32 years of records, passport renewals, utility bills, National Health Service records, and yes, we even have records of you visiting her. Noam then showed her a stack of entry and exit records. You visited London in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2019, 2021, 22, 2023, and again in 2024. That's 8 visits, each time captured by surveillance cameras at Heathrow and confirmed by phone location data showing you spending time at your mother's residence in East London. She deliberately laid out photos, airport security camera images clearly showing Omar, and phone location data plotted meticulously on maps of London. For years, you've been visiting your mother, who you publicly claimed died when you were just a child. That's straight-up fraud, lying about a deceased parent in your refugee narrative. I never said she died. Omar tried to explain. What I said was that I grew up without her. But Noam quickly cut her off by pulling up some quotes. Here's one from an interview with CNN in 2019. It says, "I lost my mother when I was very young in Somalia." Then there's an interview with Time magazine from 2020. It states, "My mother died during the Civil War." And finally, from a speech at a refugee advocacy event in 2021. Here you claim, as someone who lost her mother to the violence in Somalia, you've said it repeatedly, and it's simply a lie. Noam then moved right on to the next issue. But that was just the beginning of the deception. The bigger fraud, it turns out, was your name. Your refugee application was filed under the Omar family name. However, you weren't actually born an Omar. Instead, you were born Ilhan Noor. Noam presented birth records as proof. This is a birth certificate from Somalia, dated 1982. It clearly states Ilhan Noor, daughter of Noor Sahed Ibrahim, not an Omar. You used a completely different family name to qualify for refugee status under family reunification provisions. That's undeniably identity fraud. Omar quickly responded, saying, "Birth records from Somalia during a civil war are unreliable." Omar's voice was visibly shaking. Noam replied, "But now we have corroborating evidence." Noam pointed to school records from the Dab refugee camp in Kenya listing you as Ilhan Nora. She added, "We also have testimony from individuals who knew your family in Somalia identifying you by that name, and most damning of all, your marriage records." With that, she pulled out marriage certificates. In 2002, you married Ahmed Hersi in an Islamic ceremony and had 2 children with him. Then, just 7 years later, in 2009, you married Ahmed Noor Said Elme in a legal civil ceremony in Minnesota. This Ahmed shared the same last name as your birth name. We have compelling evidence suggesting Elme is, in fact, your biological brother. You married your own brother to commit immigration fraud, specifically to help him obtain legal status. That's a lie, Omar insisted, though her voice completely lacked conviction. Then, take a DNA test. Noam boldly challenged. Right now, we'll compare your DNA to Ahmed Elme's. If you're not related, this entire theory is destroyed. However, if you are siblings, you definitely committed marriage fraud. Omar, completely silent, said nothing. You divorced Elme in 2017. Noam continued. Right after he obtained citizenship, you then legally married Hersi again in 2018. This is a classic immigration fraud pattern. You marry a family member to help them get their papers. Then you divorce them once they've secured their legal status. And finally, you go back to your real spouse. She then stacked all the documents neatly. First, a fake identity on your refugee application. Second, lying about your mother being dead. And third, a fraudulent marriage to your brother. She concluded, every single piece of your immigration history is fraudulent. That means your citizenship was obtained illegally, and illegal citizenship, of course, can be revoked. NSA Director General Sarah Mitchell then presented the communications intelligence. As a career signals intelligence officer, she had spent 3 decades intercepting enemy communications. Presenting intercepts of an American congresswoman felt absolutely surreal to her. But the evidence was the evidence. Mitchell began without preamble. We've been monitoring your communications under a FISA warrant since June 2025. The warrant itself was approved based on probable cause that you were engaged in activities threatening national security. And what we found only confirms those suspicions. She proceeded to show call logs. Over 6 months, you made 43 phone calls to various Somali government officials. These weren't just casual calls, they were strategic calls. You spoke with the Somali foreign minister 7 times, the defense minister 3 times, and members of parliament 12 times, among other officials. I'm allowed to speak with foreign governments, Omar quickly responded. It's part of my congressional oversight duties. The content of those calls, however, raises serious concerns, Mitchell interrupted. She then played an audio clip. Omar's voice was heard speaking in Somali, with English subtitles instantly appearing on a screen. The subtitles read, Omar, the Americans are reducing their support for AMISAM. This creates an opportunity for the government to negotiate directly with clan elders in the South, completely without U.S. interference. Then a Somali official's voice asked, when will the reduction begin? Omar replied, the briefing said March, but the administration doesn't want it public yet. Mitchell immediately stopped the audio. That was you discussing classified U.S. military planning with a foreign government. This was information you specifically received in a classified Foreign Affairs Committee briefing. You actually disclosed it to Somalia before it was even public. She then played yet another clip. Omar's voice said, I'm working with my colleagues to block the aid package to Kenya. If we can cut their funding, they'll be forced to pull troops from AMISAM, and Somalia will gain more autonomy. Mitchell stopped the recording once more. You're clearly discussing your efforts to undermine a U.S. ally's military operation. And you're doing this not because it's bad for America, but because you solely want Somalia to have more autonomy. Here's another clip. Omar stated, we are working on this together. I represent the Somali people in Congress. Their interests are my interests. Mitchell then looked directly at Omar. You do not represent the Somali people. You represent Minnesota's 5th District. You're a U.S. Congresswoman, he stated, not a Somali government representative. But in these calls, he continued, you consistently refer to Somalia as we and America as they. More intercepts were then presented. You've also been in contact with individuals linked to the Muslim Brotherhood, she revealed. Specifically, 3 calls with Mohammed Badi, an Egyptian national in Qatar with known ties to the Brotherhood, plus multiple encrypted messages with organizations officially designated as Brotherhood fronts. This pattern strongly suggests your political loyalty lies with Islamic political movements, not the United States. This is Islamophobic profiling, Omar cried out, a note of desperation in her voice. You're targeting me simply because I'm Muslim. No, Congresswoman, we're investigating you because you send money to terrorists and pass classified information to foreign governments. Mitchell retorted, her voice icy. Your religion is entirely irrelevant. Your actions, however, are what truly matter here. Next, White House counsel Todd Blanche stepped forward, ready to outline the legal framework. Having served as a federal prosecutor before private practice and his current role at the White House, he was well versed in such matters. He knew exactly how to simplify complex legal procedures for all to understand. Congresswoman Omar, he began, let me explain the legal situation you're facing under Section 340 of the Immigration and Nationality Act. Citizenship obtained through fraud or material misrepresentation, as you know, can be revoked. The standard here is civil, not criminal, meaning a preponderance of the evidence, not beyond a reasonable doubt. He then presented the statute. We'll file a denaturalization complaint in federal district court. There, we'll present evidence that you lied on your applications concerning your name, your family, and your background. The very evidence Secretary Noem just presented. If the judge finds that the fraud was material to obtaining citizenship, your naturalization will be revoked. I'll fight it in court, Omar declared, attempting defiance but sounding undeniably scared. You'll lose, Blanche stated, cutting straight to the point. We have documentary evidence of this fraud. Birth certificates revealing a different name. Records showing your mother alive when you claimed she had died. Marriage records suggesting fraud, and phone records proving your visits to her in London. The evidence, Congresswoman, is overwhelming. He then pulled out several case precedents. Here's Maslining Jack versus United States from 2017, he pointed out, a Supreme Court ruling on denaturalization. The court held that material fraud in immigration proceedings is indeed grounds for revocation. And here's United States versus OD from 2015. Citizenship revoked again for immigration fraud. The defendant in that case fought for 2 years. She lost, and she was deported. Once your citizenship is revoked, he continued, you effectively become a deportable alien. Immigration and Customs Enforcement will then take custody. You'll be detained, pending deportation proceedings. And given Somalia's cooperation, you'd be deported there within just 90 days. Omar's hands were visibly shaking. You can't deport a member of Congress, she exclaimed. You won't be a member of Congress, Blanche calmly countered. Once these charges become public, you'll be forced to resign or you'll be expelled. The House isn't going to retain a member facing denaturalization for terrorism financing and immigration fraud. You'll be out within a week. He then revealed the timeline. Here's exactly how it plays out if you decide to fight this. Tomorrow, the president holds a press conference announcing this investigation. He'll declassify enough evidence to publicly brand you a terrorism financier and an immigration fraudster. The media will go absolutely crazy. Your Democratic colleagues will immediately distance themselves. They simply can't defend terrorism financing. Within 48 hours, the House will vote on your expulsion. A 2/3 majority is required. With this evidence now public, you'll be lucky to get 30 votes in your favor. You'll be expelled. We'll then file the denaturalization complaint. You'll fight it. It will take 18 months to 2 years. You'll lose. The evidence is simply too strong. Citizenship revoked. ICE will arrest you. You'll be detained at an immigration facility. You could try to fight deportation, but you'd have no basis. Somalia is considered safe for you, and you'll be publicly deported, with every camera in the world watching. He then closed his folder. That's the hard way, Congresswoman. Trump had been observing silently, letting his team present all the evidence. Now he leaned forward, smoothly taking back control of the meeting. "So here's the situation," he stated, his voice now conversational, almost unnervingly friendly. "We have you cold on terrorism financing. $78,000 to Al-Shabaab. That alone is 20 years in prison. We have you on immigration fraud, which will strip your citizenship and lead to your deportation. And we have you on disclosing classified information. That's even more prison time." He spread his hands open. "You certainly fought back pretty hard when you first came in here. Called me senile. Said I can't even string sentences together. Said I'm weak and pathetic. That, Congresswoman, was a bad call on your part, because now I'm not exactly inclined to be generous." Omar sat completely frozen. All her earlier arrogance was now entirely gone. "But I'm a deal-maker," Trump continued, undeterred. "And I'm still going to offer you a deal anyway. Not because I like you, because I don't, but because I don't want to spend the next 2 years dealing with this entire circus. Okay, so here's what I'm offering. It's a one-time deal. Take it or leave it." He ticked off the points on his fingers. "You step down from Congress today. That's effective immediately. You'll hold a press conference tomorrow. There, you'll announce your resignation, citing health, family, or even wanting more time to help Somalia. Whatever story you choose, you'll then renounce your U.S. citizenship. You'll depart the country within 72 hours. Head to Somalia or London to stay with your very much alive mother, or anywhere else that will have you. You never, ever come back. Do all of that, and we won't prosecute. We won't pursue denaturalization. We won't hold a press conference exposing everything. Everything stays quiet. You get to control your own story. You just fade away. Maybe you even end up in Somali politics, which is clearly where you wanted to be all along." He leaned back in his chair. "Or you can tell me to go to hell. You walk out of here thinking you can fight this. And tomorrow morning, at 10 o'clock a.m., I'll be standing in the Rose Garden with Director Ray, Secretary Noem, and all of this evidence. We'll make it all public, every single piece of it. The terrorism financing, the immigration fraud, your mother being alive, the brother marriage, all of it. The media will go absolutely insane. Your colleagues will abandon you. You'll be expelled from Congress within a week. We'll file for denaturalization. You'll fight it from a detention facility for 2 years. You'll lose. And you'll get deported anyway. But instead of leaving quietly, you'll leave in handcuffs on a deportation flight with cameras rolling. The whole world will watch Ilhan Omar, the great progressive champion, get deported for immigration fraud and terrorism financing." Trump's voice softened. "Easy way or hard way, it's your choice. But either way, you are leaving. The only question is whether you control how it happens or if I do." He glanced down at his watch. "It's 3:45 right now. You have until noon Friday. That's 72 hours. If you resign by noon Friday and book a flight out of the country, we'll never speak of this again. If you don't, I'm calling that press conference." "So, what's it going to be?" Omar's voice came out as a whisper. "This is unconstitutional. You can't force a member of Congress." "I'm not forcing anything," Trump said. "I'm just giving you a choice. Leave quietly or leave in disgrace. But you are leaving because you committed fraud to get here, and you've been funding terrorists ever since you arrived. You don't belong in Congress, and you certainly don't belong in this country." He stood up, a clear sign the meeting was over. 72 hours. Director Ray will give you his card. When you decide, call him. If I don't hear from you by Friday at noon, just turn on Fox News at 10 o'clock a.m. You'll see yourself getting destroyed in real time. Omar stood, her legs feeling shaky. I need time to consult with lawyers. Consult with whoever you want, Trump said. But understand, if this goes public, not a single lawyer can save you. The evidence is simply too strong. You'll end up in Somalia either way. This way, you get to leave with some dignity. That way, you leave in handcuffs. He gestured toward the door. 72 hours. Don't waste them. Omar left the Oval Office in a daze. Secret Service agents escorted her out through the West Wing. She had arrived just 90 minutes earlier, ready to lecture the president. Now, she was leaving, facing deportation. The reporters she'd alerted were waiting outside. CNN, MSNBC, they were all there. She walked past them without a word, completely ignoring their shouted questions. She got into her car, driving back to the Capitol in silence. Her mind was racing. This couldn't possibly be real. This had to be a bluff. Some kind of intimidation tactic. But the evidence, the photos, the recordings, her own voice on NSA intercepts, the immigration documents, it was all devastatingly real. That evening, she met with lawyers, not her usual progressive activist attorneys, but serious criminal defense lawyers, immigration lawyers, people who dealt with grave federal charges. They reviewed what she told them about the evidence, and every single one gave her the same advice. Take the deal. If even half of what they showed you is real, one lawyer said, you simply can't fight this. Terrorism financing is a strict liability crime. It doesn't matter if you intended to support terrorism. You sent money to someone on the watch list. It went to terrorists. You're guilty. That's 20 years right there. Then there's the immigration fraud. Another lawyer added, that's clear grounds for denaturalization. If you lied on your applications, if you used a fake name, your citizenship can absolutely be revoked. We could fight it. But with the evidence you described, we'd lose. And you certainly can't stay in Congress through this. A third lawyer chimed in. The moment this becomes public, the pressure for expulsion will be absolutely overwhelming. Democrats won't defend you. They simply can't. Terrorism financing, immigration fraud. You'd be toxic. But Omar just couldn't accept it. She couldn't accept that Trump had beaten her. She had walked into the Oval Office, believing she held power, only to walk out confronted with deportation. She spent Wednesday in denial. She didn't resign, didn't call Ray, and simply told herself this would all blow over, that Trump was bluffing, and that he wouldn't actually go public with it. By Thursday, panic began to set in, and she called more lawyers, all of whom gave the same advice. Their advice, take the deal. Leave quietly. Because fighting would only make things worse. On Thursday night, she drafted a resignation letter, stared at it for hours, but just couldn't bring herself to sign it. Friday morning at 9 o'clock a.m., her phone rang. It was FBI Director Ray. Congresswoman, he stated, it's 9 o'clock a.m. You have 3 hours. The president is prepared to hold the press conference at noon if he doesn't hear from me that you've resigned. I need your answer now. I need more time, Omar replied. You've had 72 hours. What's your decision? Then silence on the line. Then, I'm not resigning. This is unconstitutional, and I'm going to fight it. Understood, Ray said. Ray then added, the press conference will begin at noon. I'd advise you not to make any statements until you see what evidence we're releasing. It'll be worse than you think." He hung up. At 11:45 a.m., the White House announced an urgent presidential press conference in the Rose Garden, set for noon. The stated topic: a national security matter involving a member of Congress. The media went wild with speculation. Which member was it? What had they done? By noon, every network had cut to live coverage. Trump walked out to the Rose Garden podium at 12:02 p.m. Behind him stood FBI Director Wray, DHS Secretary Noem, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. The presence of that group instantly told experienced Washington reporters that this was serious. Trump began without preamble. "I'm here to announce that the FBI has concluded a 6-month counterterrorism investigation into Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. The investigation found that Representative Omar sent $78,000 to individuals designated as terrorism supporters. That money was used to fund al-Shabaab terrorist activities in Somalia." The press corps erupted, shouting questions. Trump ignored them. The investigation also found that Representative Omar obtained her U.S. citizenship through fraud. She lied about her identity, lied about her family, and engaged in marriage fraud to help a relative obtain immigration status. Based on this evidence, the Department of Homeland Security is initiating denaturalization proceedings. More chaos erupted in the press section. Director Wray will now present some of the evidence we've declassified for this briefing. Wray stepped to the podium with a binder and began laying out the case. The wire transfers to Ahmed Nur Sai, the designation of Tawakkal Express as a terrorism financing entity, the money trail leading to al-Shabaab, and photos of terrorists who received the money. Then Noem presented the immigration fraud, the birth certificate showing a different name, passport records showing her mother was alive, and marriage records suggesting fraud. They showed just enough to publicly make their case without revealing classified sources and methods, but it was devastating. Networks split their screens, showing the Rose Garden press conference on one side and Omar's congressional office on the other, where reporters were massing. Omar's office released a statement. It read, "This is a politically motivated attack on a Muslim woman who dares to speak truth to power. President Trump is using law enforcement to target his political opponents. This is fascism." But the evidence was too strong. Even progressive media couldn't fully defend it. Yes, Trump had political motivations, but the bank records were real. The terrorism watch list designations were real. The immigration documents were real. Within hours, Democratic leadership issued careful statements. Speaker Hakeem Jeffries stated, "These are serious allegations that must be fully investigated. If true, they would represent conduct unbecoming of a member of Congress." By Friday evening, calls for her resignation were coming from Democrats, not from the squad. They stayed silent. But moderate Democrats from swing districts couldn't afford to defend terrorism financing. Saturday morning, the House Ethics Committee announced an emergency investigation. By Saturday afternoon, articles of expulsion had been drafted. On Sunday, Omar appeared on MSNBC, insisting she was innocent, that the evidence was manufactured, and that this was political persecution. But she looked scared and defensive, not at all like the confident firebrand who'd walked into the Oval Office 3 days earlier. Monday, the denaturalization complaint was filed in federal court in D.C., titled United States versus Ilhan Omar. The complaint laid out the fraud in detail. It included exhibits, the birth certificate, the marriage records, and the immigration applications with lies. Omar's lawyers filed an emergency motion to dismiss, claiming the proceedings were politically motivated. The judge, an Obama appointee, denied their motion. A political motivation doesn't invalidate proceedings if the evidence of fraud is legitimate. We'll evaluate the evidence on its own merits. On Tuesday, the House voted on her expulsion. The final vote count was 289 to 143. 86 Democrats joined all the Republicans. Ilhan Omar was then expelled from Congress. She became only the sixth member expelled in U.S. history, and the first ever for immigration fraud and terrorism financing. On Wednesday, ICE filed a detainer against her. Once her citizenship was revoked, she would be taken into custody pending deportation. Omar fought her denaturalization for 18 long months. Her lawyers tried every single argument. These included political persecution, unreliable foreign documents, and technical defects in the proceedings, but none of it ultimately worked. The evidence against her was simply too strong. The judge found, by a preponderance of the evidence, that she had lied on her immigration applications, used a false name, lied about her mother, and committed marriage fraud. In August of 2026, the judge issued his ruling. Her citizenship was revoked. The very next day, ICE arrested her at her home in Minneapolis. She was then detained at an immigration facility pending deportation. She filed appeals. However, those appeals were all denied. Somalia then confirmed they would accept her as a deportee. In November of 2026, Ilhan Omar was placed on a deportation flight to Mogadishu. The scene was captured by cameras showing her in handcuffs, being escorted onto the plane by ICE officers. She looked nothing like the confident congresswoman who had insulted the president less than 2 years earlier. The flight then took off, and America's most prominent progressive congresswoman was gone. Ilhan Omar arrived in Mogadishu in November of 2026. This was the very country she had claimed to flee as a refugee. It was also the country she had sent money to while living in America. And it was the country she had referred to as "we" in intercepted calls. Somalia, however, really didn't want her. The government made it clear she wasn't welcome in politics, nor was she welcome in public life. She was seen as an embarrassment. She was the woman who had been deported from America for fraud and terrorism financing. She tried to rebuild her life, starting a small NGO and trying to leverage her name recognition. But without her American citizenship, without her congressional platform, and without the media that had loved her, she was simply irrelevant. Her mother, still in London, refused to even see her. She told reporters that she was ashamed of what her daughter had done. Her children stayed in America with her ex-husband, Ahmed Hersi, who had divorced her and gained custody when the fraud came to light. They changed their last name. They wanted nothing to do with her. 2 years after her deportation, a Reuters reporter found her living in a small apartment in Mogadishu. She was working there as an interpreter. She had no political role, no influence, just another person trying to survive in a difficult country. The reporter asked her if she had any regrets. "I regret going to that meeting," Omar said. "I regret not taking the deal," she added. "I regret fighting," she confessed. "I should have just left quietly," she mused. "Do you regret the terrorism financing or the immigration fraud?" the reporter pressed. She didn't answer that particular question. Back in America, her deportation became a political lesson and a stark warning. You can immigrate to America. You can become a citizen. You can even get elected to Congress, but you simply cannot commit fraud to get here. You cannot fund terrorists. And you cannot maintain loyalty to foreign governments. Eventually, the evidence always catches up with you. Donald Trump spoke about it at a rally in Ohio in 2027. "I gave her a choice," Trump declared. "An easy way or the hard way," he elaborated. "Leave quietly with some dignity or get exposed and deported publicly," he stated. She chose the hard way, Trump said with a smirk. A bad choice, he emphasized. A very bad choice, he repeated. She thought she could insult me, he continued. She thought she could threaten me, he continued. She thought her media friends would protect her, he scoffed. They didn't, because we had the evidence, Trump asserted. Real, undeniable evidence, he proclaimed. And evidence doesn't care about your feelings or your Twitter followers, he declared to the crowd. The crowd roared in approval. She's in Somalia now, he stated. She probably wishes she had taken my deal, he mused aloud. But she thought she was tough, he continued. She thought she could fight the President of the United States, he mocked. But she found out differently, he smirked. Some people just learn the hard way, he finished. The Ilhan Omar case ultimately became a major precedent. As a result, immigration enforcement was significantly strengthened. Denaturalization proceedings were then streamlined for fraud cases. Members of Congress faced enhanced vetting for any foreign contacts. And every progressive who had defended her, who had called it political persecution, and who had insisted the evidence was manufactured, had to reckon with the fact that it had all been true. The terrorism financing, the immigration fraud, all of it. She had committed serious crimes. She had been caught, and she had been deported. Not because she was Muslim, not because she was progressive, but simply because she had broken the law. Years later, her story was being taught in law schools, immigration law classes, focusing on denaturalization cases, national security classes covering terrorism financing, and even political science classes on congressional ethics. The woman who'd confidently stood in the Oval Office insulting the president, convinced she was untouchable, had just learned the hardest possible lesson. Nobody is above the law. Not even a sitting member of Congress. Trump had offered her 72 hours to leave quietly. She'd flat out refused, so he'd publicly destroyed her career and deported her anyway. She truly thought she held power. She'd been terribly wrong. The evidence had the real power. The law had power. The president had power too. And Ilhan Omar spent the rest of her days in Mogadishu, deeply regretting the day she'd marched into that Oval Office, thinking she could actually bully Donald Trump. He'd just smiled, let her rant, then calmly showed her the undeniable evidence that ended her career, stripped her citizenship, and ultimately sent her back to Somalia. So, easy way or hard way?